Good afternoon and welcome back to More of the Longing, where we are going to be reading yet more of Metamorphosis, which we have been reading the last few days. This was a single ruin, but not one deserves... Hang on, let me start that again. This was a single ruin, but not one. Deserves so just a punishment alone. Mankind's a monster, and the ungodly times, confederate into guilt, are sworn to crimes. All are alike involved in ill, and all must by the same relentless fury fall. Thus ended he the greater god's ascent, by clamours urging his severe intent. The less fill up the cry for punishment, yet still with pity they remember man, and mourn as much as heavenly spirits can. They ask, when those were lost at human birth, what he would do with all this waste of earth. If his dispeopled world he would resign to beasts a mute and more ignoble line. Neglected altars must no longer smoke, if none were left to worship and invoke. To whom the father of the gods replied, lay that unnecessary fear aside. Mine be the care new people to provide. I will from wondrous principles ordain a race unlike the first, and try my skill again. Already had he tossed the flaming brand, and rolled the thunder in his spacious hand, preparing to discharge on seas and land, but stopped for fear, thus violently driven, the sparks should catch his axle-tree of heaven. Remembering in the fates a time when fire should to battlements of heaven aspire, and all his blazing worlds above should burn, and all the inferior globe to cinders turn. His dire artillery thus dismissed, he bent his thoughts to some securer punishment, concludes to pour a watery deluge down, and what he durst not burn resolves to drown. The northern breath that freezes floods he binds with all the race of cloud-dispelling winds. The south he loosed who night and horror brings, and fogs are shaken from flaggy wings. From his divided beard 2 streams he pours, his head and rheumy eyes distil in showers. With rain his robe and heavy mantle flow, and lazy mists are lowering on his brow. Still, as he swept along with his clenched fist, he squeezed the clouds the imprisoned clouds resist. The skies from pole to pole with peals resound, and showers enlarged come pouring on the ground. Then, clad in colours of a various dye, Junonian iris breeds a new supply. To feed the clouds impetuous rain descends, the bearded corn beneath the burden bends. Defrauded clowns deplore their perished grain, and the long labours of the year are vain. Nor from his patrimonial heaven alone is Jove content to pour his vengeance down. Aid from his brother of the seas he craves, to help him with auxiliary waves. The watery tyrant calls his brooks and floods, who roll from mossy caves their moist abodes, and with perpetual urns his palace fill, to whom in brief he thus imparts his will. Small exhortation needs your powers employ, and this bad world, so Jove requires, destroy. Let loose the rains to all your watery store, bear down the dams and open every door. The floods by nature enemies to land, and proudly swelling with their new command, remove the living stones that stopped their way, and gushing from their source augment the sea. Then with his mace their monarch struck the ground. With inward trembling earth received the wound, and rising streams a ready passage found. The expanded waters gather on the plain. They float the fields and overtop the grain, then rushing onwards with a sweepy sway, bear flocks and folds and labouring hinds away. Nor safe their dwellings were, for sapped by floods, their houses fell upon their household gods. The solid piles too strongly built to fall, high o'er their heads behold a watery wall. Now seas and earth were in confusion lost, a world of waters and without a coast. One climbs a cliff, one in his boat is borne, and ploughs above where late he sowed his corn. Others o'er chimney tops and turrets row, and drop their anchors on the meads below. Or downward driven they bruise the tender vine, or tossed aloft are knocked against a pine. And where of late the kids had cropped the grass, the monsters of the deep now take their place, insulting their raids on the city's ride, and wandering dolphins o'er the palace glide. On leaves and masts of mighty oak they browse, and their broad fins entangle in the boughs. The frightened wolf now swings amongst the sheep, the yellow lion wanders in the deep. His rapid force no longer helps the boar, the stag swims faster than he ran before. The fowls long beating on their wings in vain, despair of land and drop into the main. Now hills and vales no more distinction know, and levelled nature lies oppressed below. The most of mortals perish in the flood, the small remainder dies for want of food. A mountain of stupendous height there stands, betwixt the Athenian and Boeotian lands, the bound of fruitful fields where fields they were, but then a field of waters did appear. Parnassus is its name, whose forky rise mounts through the clouds and mates the lofty skies. High on the summit of this dubious cliffs, Deucalion waiting moored his little skiff. He with his wife were only left behind, of perished man they too were humankind. The mountain nymphs and Themis they adore, and from her oracles relief implore. The most upright of mortal men was he, the most sincere and holy woman she. When Jupiter surveying earth from high, beheld it in a lake of water lie, that were so many millions lately lived, but two, the best of either sex, survived. He loosed the northern wind, fierce Boreas flies, to puff away the clouds and purge the skies. Serenely while he blows the vapours driven, discover heaven to earth, and earth to heaven. The billows fall while Neptune lays his mace on the rough sea and smooths its furrowed face. Already Triton at his call appears, above the waves a Tyrian robe he wears, and in his hand a crooked trumpet bears. The sovereign bids him peaceful sounds inspire, and give the waves the signal to retire. His writhen shell he takes, whose narrow vent grows by degrees into a large extent, then gives it breath, the blast with doubling sound runs the wide circuit of the world around. The sun first heard it in his early east, and met the rattling echoes in the west. The waters, listening to the trumpet's roar, obey the summons and forsake the shore. A thin circumference of land appears, and earth, but not at once, her visage rears, and peeps upon the seas from upper grounds, the streams but just contained within their bounds. By slow degrees into their channels crawl, and earth increases as the waters fall. In longer time the tops of trees appear, which mud of their dishonoured branches bear. At length the world was all restored to view, but desolate and of a sickly hue. Nature beheld herself and stood aghast, a dismissal desart, and silent waste. And I think we'll leave it there because that is 10 minutes. So thank you very much for joining me for this one. Hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, or night, no matter what time of day it is. I hope you have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we'll be back tomorrow with more of The Longing. Goodbye.